Hello and welcome to this lesson about adding and subtracting rational numbers. The learning target for this video is adding and subtracting positive and negative fractions and decimals. So first of all, I just want to explain that this video is not going to go too much into the process about how to add and subtract fractions and decimals. It's going to assume that you know how to do that. It's more going to talk about how you do that when you're adding and subtracting fractions and decimals that are either positive or negative, or when you have to combine fractions and decimals. So the process that we need, what's kind of nice, is nothing really new. So what we're going to do is we're going to do normal addition and subtraction with fractions and decimals. So all those rules that you know remain the same. You're going to use those exact same rules. Second, you're also going to be applying same rules with integers about positive and negative numbers. So again, there's nothing really new that's going on with adding and subtracting rational numbers when you open it up to positive and negative ones. It's just, can you combine, what you do with fractions and decimals, and can you combine what's going on with integers when you have positive and negative numbers there. So let's look at some examples and walk through it. Let's say for our first example, we're looking at something like negative 2/3 minus 3/5. Alright, so in a situation like this, we have two things we need to do. One, we need to get a common denominator. Second, we need to think about what's going to be happening with our actual value here, our number. And the way I'm looking at this is I have 0, and I'm taking negative 2/3, and I'm going to subtract over 3/5. And so what that means is that my final answer is going to be a negative number. And one thing that I've talked about with adding and subtracting integers is that when you have the same sign, so negative, negative, you add the values together and then you put a negative sign on it when it's negative, or you keep it positive if it's positive. But here, we're just going to make our answer negative. So what we're going to do is really treat this like 2/3 plus 3/5. So like I said, we now need to get a common denominator. And that common denominator is going to be 15. So I have to multiply my 2/3 by 5/5 and my 3/5 by 3/3. And so I'll have 10/15 plus 9/15. And so that's going to give me a final answer of 19/15, or 1 4/15. But now the thing is, it's not 19/15 or 1 4/15. It's the final piece of this is realizing that since these both had negatives on them, it's negative 19/15 or negative 1 4/15. So either way, you can write it as an improper fraction or a mixed number. Either way is good. Let's do another example. Let's say we had 7/12 plus a negative 5/6. All right, so now here I have to really be able to compare my numbers here. And let's look at the relationship that we have here. 7/12 and 5/6. And I'm just looking at the absolute value. Which one is larger? Well, 5/6 is the larger of the two. And so what that means is, because 5/6 in the original problem here is negative, my final answer is going to be a negative number. So I got to keep that in mind. And now I go back to sort of like some rules with integers. I have a positive one and a negative one. And so what I do is I find the difference between the two of them. And so really what I need to do is 5/6 minus 7/12. And again, I'm doing that because 5/6 is the larger one. So get a common denominator, and all I have to do is multiply my 5/6 by 2/2. And I'm looking at 10/6 minus 10/12 minus 7/12, which will give me 5/12. That is the number. But now remember that the sign on that number was negative. So 5 over 12. And the answer is negative because negative 5/6 is further away than 7/12. And so I'm going to be pulling it over more to the negative side. And I'm also just realizing that I can't crunch numbers. I'm seeing 7, I'm seeing 12. I thought 5. I'm sorry. 3. That's better. 10 minus 7 is 3. So 3/12. And what we can now do is kick it up or go one step further, which is to reduce it to make this negative 1/4. There we go. Box it, walk away. Now, let's talk about some examples with decimals. Again, this process is similar. We're going to look at addition rules and subtraction rules with decimals and what you would do with positive and negative numbers. So let's say we have negative 3.2 minus a negative 5.7. So what I'm going to do here is first clean up my problem so I can kind of see what's going on. I have to address these negatives. So I'm going to go negative 3.2, and then when you have back-to-back negatives, it becomes positive 5.7. All right, now take a look at the numbers I have. 5.7, 3.2, which one is larger? Well, 3.2 is less than 5.7, and 5.7 is the positive one, so that means my final answer will be positive. And then to figure out how this works, or to figure out what the actual number is going to be, I'll go 5.7 minus 3.2. That gives me a 5, that gives me a 2, 2.5, and that's my final answer, 2.5. And it stays positive because 5.7 again is further away from 0 than negative 3.2 is from 0. And so that's what you do with decimals. Same idea. Now finally, let's talk about what you do with both. And the big thing that we have to do with both is put them in the same form. So put in the same form. What you might have to do is convert a fraction to a decimal or a decimal to a fraction. So let's say we had this problem here. Let's say we had 5/3 plus a negative 0.8. Well, what I'm going to want to do here is put both of these as either fractions or as decimals. And I'm going to go with fractions because thirds doesn't make a nice decimal. It's a repeating decimal. So I want to leave that as a fraction. So I have to convert 0.8 to a fraction. Now the easiest way to do this is just to go 8 over 10 based off of, I got one spot here, so I have to have 1 0 after my 1 there. And then I can reduce it to get 4 over 5. So now the problem I'm really looking at is 5/3 plus a negative 4/5. So we've seen a problem similar to this already. What I have to do now is combine both my numbers. First I have to get a common denominator. And so that would be 15. So let's do this in a different color. 5 over 5, 3 over 3. I have 25 over 15 plus a negative 12 over 15. Now I can just combine my numerators. I'm looking at 25 minus 12 for 13 over 15. And that's the final answer. For good measure, let's do one more. Let's say we had negative 2 1/4 minus 3.45. All right, so now in this situation, 1/4, that's a pretty easy fraction to convert to a decimal. So I'll just do that. And so I'll make this negative 2.25 minus 3.45. And here, this is where I have same signs, both negative. So my final answer is going to be negative, but I'm going to actually add the numbers together. So 2.25 plus 3.45. And just know that whatever the answer is, it's going to be negative. So let's see here. I'll get a 0. 6 plus that 1 will give me 7 plus 5. And like I said, that number will actually be negative. 5.70. So that is in a nutshell how to add and subtract rational numbers. assuming you know how to handle fractions and decimals. But it's a combination of those rules plus the rules you use for positive and negative numbers. Good luck with your homework and practice, and let me know if you have any questions.